My name is Katie. Vision problems are a common occurrence in my family, and it didn't escape me either. From the age of 10, my eyesight began to deteriorate. I got used to wearing glasses without much effort. But along with the loss of my eyesight, other peculiarities began to appear. My hearing and sense of smell became much stronger. I lived in a small town and attended a regular school. However, due to frequent illnesses such as colds, migraines, or something else, my attendance at school was irregular. It was not uncommon for me to spend weeks just lying in bed, lost in time. One such day, I noticed that I was having a hard time sleeping on my back. It seemed that as soon as I closed my eyes, there was some kind of shadow over them, accompanied by a slight smell of moisture. It reminded me of the smell of the streets after a rainstorm, when the sun doesn't reach them for a week. I chalked the smell up to the lack of fresh air in the room. It was possible that it was a consequence of my sensitivity to odors, but the shadow bothered me. When I had a migraine and my eyes hurt from the pressure in my skull, it became unbearable. At first, it helped to turn on my side. The shadow seemed to disappear and I could fall asleep. Eventually, though, even that stopped helping. Now I could feel some movement of air against my cheek and ear, more intuitively than physically. And that would be fine, but there was no explanation for the origin of this air movement. There was no draft. The window was closed. The only explanation could be the presence of something in the room, but as a skeptic, I didn't want to even consider that possibility. When I discussed this sleep problem with my mother, she, being a doctor, suggested sedatives. I took them and went to school. I felt relieved and forgot about my shadow problem for a while, but not for long. I had a lot of classes that day, then extra classes, and I came home completely exhausted. I put off my homework for the evening and went to bed. My sleep didn't last long, though. I woke up soon after and felt the strange presence that had disturbed me earlier. I was lying on my back. The smell of moisture in my nostrils became stronger, and a shadow appeared over my eyes. I was afraid to open my eyes. My glasses were on the bedside table nearby. Without them, I could see practically nothing. Besides, I didn't want to see what was probably right above me. As I lay there, I began to imagine different scenarios, almost convincing myself that it was all my hallucinations. But then something happened that changed everything. I heard the sound of the key turning in the lock. My mother had come home. I realized from the sounds that she was undressing in the hallway, taking off her coat, and walking into my room. At that time, the shadow above me seemed to disappear. The whole feeling of heaviness was gone, and the smell was gone as well. I even felt some air movement that was more noticeable than before, and I was glad I hadn't opened my eyes. At that moment, I realized that I had met something unusual, maybe not even from this world, and that this something was only interested in me and didn't want contact with other people. When my mother came into the room, I opened my eyes, grabbed my glasses, and looked around. Mom smiled, probably thinking I had just woken up, and went into the kitchen to unload the groceries. Since then, I was afraid to sleep alone. I went to school, I went out, I did everything I could to avoid being alone at home. I slept with my mother. She was surprised, but I waved it off, saying I felt safer that way. I hadn't told her about my suspicions yet. Every time my mom went to the kitchen to get a drink of water, I was sure to feel that heaviness, the shadow, the smell of dampness. Interestingly, the smell disappeared so quickly that when my mother returned, she did not even have time to smell it. Meanwhile, the visits of this shadow began to tire me more and more. It seemed to be more and more persistent. I began to get tired easily. I couldn't sleep well. My dreams became jagged and disturbing. One day I had the first tantrum of my life. It started with an ordinary question from my mother about my well-being, and then something broke inside me. It was as if I burst into tears and told everything. About the shadow or creature, about the smell of dampness, about its visits only during my sleep, only when I was alone. First I would talk, then I would scream, and then I would cry. Mom was shocked. I screamed something unintelligible. Then I barricaded myself in the bathroom and cried there for about an hour. Mom waited outside the door, knocked, and demanded to talk. When I came out, we talked calmly. I didn't want to discuss it anymore, and I agreed that I was tired and needed a sedative, promising that I wouldn't have any more tantrums. But I couldn't keep that promise. Soon we were in desperate need of money. There was no one to lend it to, so my mother took the night shift. That day after school, I went out with my friends until the evening, and when I got home, I decided to drink coffee and stay up until morning and then go to school. I drank about 3 cups, sat down at the kitchen table, turned on the TV in the kitchen, and tried to relax. I thought the sound on the TV was quiet, no matter how much I tried to turn up the volume. Suddenly the signal was cut off, and there was loud static coming from the speakers, and that was the last thing I remember clearly. Then there was a hazy image of me lying on a table in the kitchen, a lamp burning above me. Then something cracked and everything went dark. The next thing I knew, my nostrils were filled with the smell of moisture. My body felt paralyzed. I couldn't move. I tried, but I couldn't. I felt a thud and fell off the table. I heard breathing. Softly, but it was above me, almost in my consciousness. The next thing I remember is opening the door to the balcony, trying to reach the fire escape, then the siren, my mother crying, and the walls of the hospital. A month later, I was transferred from the trauma center to a psychiatric hospital. I began to have hysterics again. I tried to attack the doctors, screaming that I was healthy and that it would come anyway. I lost a lot of weight, about 15 pounds. I was getting worse. I could see shadows creeping across the walls of my room during the day. I hardly slept at all, waking up screaming every time. Now the pills were dragging me down so much that I could hardly see or hear. My perception has almost slowed down, but the shadow is here. It's almost inside me. I can feel it. When I stop, lie down, get up, something black, almost tangible, begins to fill my consciousness. A little more and it will be in me. And then I don't know what will happen to me. I'm so scared. I'm writing this at night. I ran out of the ward and sneaked to the duty officer's computer while he was sleeping. I feel like I have to tell you about it. Maybe I'm crazy, but maybe this is something real.